The West Virginia Mountaineers are 9-4 through the non-conference slate, and they've got a date coming up with the Iowa State Cyclones at the Hilton Coliseum in Ames. It's going to be a tough test. But before we get to that, let's break down this non-conference slate for the Mountaineers. We got to be honest with the state of this West Virginia men's basketball program as they head into Big 12 conference play. This is the Mountaineer Moment, your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. From pregame to postgame coverage and breaking news, we've got you covered. Let's go. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Mountaineer Moment, episode 118. And this is your source for all things West Virginia in football and basketball. Why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us, whatever platform you're on, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. Wherever you're at, wherever you're watching or listening, hit that subscribe button for us. Help us out. Help me help you so you can be in the know when we have new content coming your way here on Mountaineer Moment, all things football and basketball. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about this West Virginia basketball team who's hasn't played a whole lot lately, right? They had the game against Ohio State back, that double overtime game on December 13th. They played against Mississippi Valley State 9 days later on the 22nd. And now they're off again until Iowa State in the new year, January 22nd, to tip off conference play with a tough test against the number 3 ranked Iowa State Cyclones on the road. West Virginia's first true road game of the season comes in January, and it comes against the third best team in the nation, undefeated Iowa State, who has one game between now and then, and they're going to be undefeated, let's just put it that way, when the Mountaineers come to town. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, because this is not a Iowa State preview, that episode is coming your way here on Mountaineer Moment as we inch closer to tip-off, of that one in the new year. But before we get to that, we got to be honest with ourselves about this Mountaineer basketball team. They are 9-4. Some of the material that we're going to talk about here on this episode is going to be some things you've heard me say. Some of it will be new and, different insights and different things. But we're going to talk about 4 different things, really 3 different things throughout this episode that, I'm noticing just observations regarding the start to the season for West Virginia. Obviously, they're 9-4. Obviously, it's a new look team, new coach, new staff, new everything. But as fans, we got to be honest with ourselves about this team because we now know a thing or two about this team, more than we did before the season tipped off in early November. Now here at the end of December, and we're still going to learn a lot about this team through the first week or 2 or 3 of conference play and beyond, right? This team's going to look different in February than they do right now. This team's going to look different in March than they do right now, hopefully in a good way. But we're going to learn more things about this team along the way. But through 13 games, through a non-conference schedule where they haven't even played against a ranked team, they sit at 9-4. And so the first thing that we'll speak to in relation to the start of the season for West Virginia is just this ongoing cycle that they've been in. They've beaten up on teams that are simply not as talented as they are. They have 4 losses against unranked opponents in power conferences. They started out 5-0, including a win over the Pitt Panthers, who we didn't know a whole lot about at the time, but they've struggled this season. Sitting at 7-6, West Virginia, again, 9-4. Then West Virginia drops consecutive games in Charleston, South Carolina, as part of that tournament down there against Clemson and Xavier. They follow that up by winning 4 out of 6 down the stretch of non-conference with losses to Wake Forest and Ohio State on consecutive Saturdays in December on neutral site games. So all 4 losses came away from the Mountaineer Hope Coliseum. All 4 losses came on neutral site courts. West Virginia's 0-4 on games that haven't been played in Morgantown, right? We just said it because they haven't played a true road game yet. 0-4 outside of Morgantown. And, again, with all due respect to the teams that they've played so far this season, they're beating up on teams that aren't good. I mentioned this in a previous episode, not to harp on it too much, here. Pitt might be the only team West Virginia's faced with a winning record, and they're 7-6, as far as in teams that they've beaten. I want to say all 8 of the other teams that they've played have losing records on the season. And, they come from lower conferences. This is lower quality basketball teams that they're beating up on. And it shows because you're winning. You've won 9 games. You've won 8 games if you take Pitt out of that. You've won 8 games against teams that aren't good, teams that aren't, even at the top of their smaller conferences or anywhere near that, at least so far this season. They're beating up on those teams, and they've yet to pick up a win that you would deem as an impressive win on a resume. That's just the reality of the situation. They haven't beaten anybody. They have simply not beaten a team yet, and we're in the new year, right? The next time that they play is going to be in 2026, still without a win to their name, without a real quality, whatever, quad 1, quad 2, all that stuff, like whatever. They haven't beaten anybody. That's just the simple facts of it. It doesn't take Joe Lunardi to figure that out. They haven't beaten anybody. The 4 teams that they've lost to aren't bad. They're not Iowa State, not Houston, not Arizona. Right? Those teams are still coming. And so there's some things to figure out. But West Virginia has been in an ongoing cycle where you beat up on bad teams and you lose to some decent, power conference teams. That's it. That is it so far. And the easy, low-hanging fruit, is to compare to last season because that's what we know. It's a whole different team, whole different everything, and I get that. But at this point last season, for a team that got snubbed out of March Madness, and again, we shouldn't even be thinking about March with this team. I understand that as well. Please hear me. But at this point last season, right, you beat Gonzaga, you beat Arizona. December 31st, you went to Kansas and beat them. I was in the arena for that one, just saying. I had that, that impressive arena, Kansas. And this point this season, you got nothing. You haven't beaten anybody. Have not beaten a single team. Now, that's the bad news. That's the facts. That's the news. The good news is you're going to have plenty of opportunities in the Big 12 to beat good teams. Now, how many of those wins are you going to collect? I don't know. That remains to be seen. But the cycle through the non-conference was bad team comes to Morgantown, you beat them, you play a decent team on a neutral site, and you lose. Point blank, period, end of the story. That's it. That was the cycle. But that cycle, all things come to an end. Not just all good things come to an end, but all things come to an end. And that cycle's over now because you're not going to have opportunities to play against bad, like that level of bad teams. This is the Big 12. Ross Hodge, welcome to the Big 12. Welcome to Ames and Hilton Coliseum for an undefeated Cyclones team on January 2nd, 9 o'clock. You had better be ready. You had better be ready. Because after that, you got Cincinnati. You got 17th ranked Kansas. You got 8th ranked Houston, Colorado, Arizona State, number 1 Arizona, Kansas State, Baylor, and that's just the month of January. Like this is going to be a challenge. This is going to be a challenge, a grind all throughout the Big 12. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, you need to get the X amount of wins in order to do this, in order to make this tournament, in order to make the NIT or the March Madness. You need to get we're not having that discussion yet because it's still late December and because this team hasn't given us a reason to have that discussion. Right? You haven't beaten anybody yet. So if that trend were to continue in March, we're not talking about a seed. We're not talking about sneaking in. We're not talking about having a hard march and getting in. We're not talking about any of that. And so this team has given us no reason to talk about those kind of things at this point in the season. Period. Your work is cut out for you if you want to do anything. If you want to play postseason basketball beyond your conference tournament, you got to do a lot of work here. You didn't do yourself any favors. You did not do yourself any favors in the non-conference slate. That's the reality of it. But the cycle ends because now it's on to conference play. 0-0. Tough first game. Get that completely. But we'll see what happens. Now, the 3 things out of that I want to address come with just some, analyzing what we've seen so far through this season. So 3 things out of that. You can see that if you're watching on YouTube over on the side, just kind of the outline for this episode. The first one there is the Mountaineers' second half defense. It has been, and I'm going to give you the numbers to back that up, it has been the Achilles heel for the Mountaineers thus far. The defensive side of the ball, second half defense. All 4 of West Virginia's losses, the defense has allowed 40-plus point second halves to the opposing offenses. That's right. So that's Clemson. You gave up 25 in the first half, 45 in the second half. You lost that game. Xavier stayed hot through the first half and the second half. I think they scored 41 in the second half. Wake Forest, you were tied with them. Then, Drew Karras and them come out real hot in the second half, hang 40-plus on your head, you lose that one. You were up big on Ohio State in the second half. You give up 40-plus points in the second half. They send it to overtime. They send it to a second overtime, and West Virginia falls in that one. So it's not rocket science. It's also not a coincidence that your second half defense has cost you these games. Ross Hodge hangs his hat on defense. This, from a 30,000-foot view, if you just hop on ESPN and check out the nation's leaders in defense, from a 30,000-foot view, West Virginia ranks among one of the best teams defensively this season, allowing just 60.2 points per game. But that doesn't tell you the full story. That doesn't give you the full tale of this team and this struggle defensively in second halves. Do I think Ross Hodge is a great defensive-minded coach? Yes. Do I think there are great defenders individually on this defense? Yes. But there have been some noticeable breakdowns that have cost you games. Again, allowing Xavier to knock 16 threes down. Clemson, I remember they're big, in that game. West Virginia had a lead late. You give up a couple threes, and I think, an easy bucket to a big man for them, and they ended up winning that game. Drew Karras went nuclear in the second half, and then Ohio State, you just cost yourself. And again, offense isn't, we're going to get to the offensive side of the ball, but defensively, second halves of games have been the killer. And it's just simply not, and I think this aligns well with like Ross Hodge and his mantra and his style of coaching and all that. You do the math, right? If a team scores 40 in each half, that's 80 points. West Virginia's given up 60 a game because they've beaten up on some lower competition. We already hit on that one a lot. But, that's not – Ross Hodge would rather a game be 65 points than 80, 85 points. And so when Ross Hodge wouldn't be signing up for it, in other words. He's not signing up for a track meet. He's not signing up for, they're going to score 40, we're going to score 45. We're just going to outscore them. That's not Ross Hodge's way. It's simply not. And so the 4 losses for this team more accurately tell the tale of the tape, because you've struggled in 4 second halves and you've lost all 4 of these games, right? Even just one of these goes better. You're winning that game. You hold a team to 30 in the second half. You win that game. Ross Hodge would rather play a game in the 60s than he would the 80s. But your second half defense is preventing you from doing that. That's it. Again, just to run through that really, really, really quick. So 45 points from Clemson in the second half. They were down 7 at halftime. They won that game. Xavier, right, incredibly hot first half. They were not in the 40s, though, I don't think. I remember looking at the box score of halftime in that game against Xavier. It was 36-28 Xavier at the half. They're up 8, but they made 7 threes or something like that in the first half, really efficient. It was like, they're not going to keep that up. Well, they did. And they scored 42 points in the second half, continued their hot shooting. Then again, West Virginia tied with Wake Forest in Charleston, West Virginia this time. Drew Karras catches fire. They score 41 points in the second half. They win the game by 9 points. It was a tie game at halftime. And then Ohio State erased a big second half deficit for them. West Virginia was up 15, 16, something like that. I think they were up 10 at halftime, and they scored 41 points. They forced overtime, and then eventually they win the game in double OT. So simply put, West Virginia has seen immense defensive struggles in 4 second halves this season. That's the facts. And in all 4 of those games, West Virginia lost. Just the facts. Second thing we'll talk about as we move over to the offensive side of things, shot creation. Shot creation has been poor for West Virginia this year, and even dating back to the Bob Huggins era, right? It seems like West Virginia teams have struggled to find numerous players on one team that are capable of creating their own shots. And on more than one occasion this season, it seems like their only chance or attempt to score is running on or huff all around the court, trying to get them open for a 3. It just seems like too many times that's their offensive game plan. That's how they're creating shots. And Honor Huff's extremely good at getting open, extremely good at running around and doing his thing. And taking contested shots and non-contested. He's just good. He's just really, really good at knocking them down. He has been a pleasure to watch. But aside from like that, not a whole lot of shot creation on this team. You know, you think back to even previous teams. Again, you mentioned like Bob Huggins' era, right? Like sometimes these teams would go on these crazy scoring droughts. Sometimes West Virginia goes on crazy scoring droughts in 2025. You know, obviously Javon Small, a league of his own last year for West Virginia. I mean, that dude was unbelievable. You know, and even last season there weren't like, aside from him, right? Because he saved the day a lot. And a guy that shall remain nameless on this show who sat out most of the season. He would have been good for shot creation, but he didn't play. It wasn't a whole... I mean, it's college, right? It's not the NBA where everybody can create their own shot. But it seems like West Virginia has some years, sometimes, some teams filled with guys who just really can't go and get a bucket. You know, and if there's one likely candidate on this team, it's Trayson Eaglestaff. That's why he was brought here, to go and get a bucket. He can create shots. You know, we know that. That's why we brought him here. But he's been inconsistent this season. Hopefully he's turning a corner, right? He's had some, you know, a few good games lately. He led the team in scoring in Mountaineers' latest game against Mississippi Valley State with 23 points. He had 23 points against Little Rock. You know, but against Ohio State, he was 1 for 9 with 5 points. Against Wake Forest, he played just 10 minutes. Didn't attempt a shot, right? He didn't come here. You know, Wake Forest, that was a game. You're tied at halftime, but then Wake Forest offense wakes up in the second half, and you can't hang with them. And meanwhile, Trayson Eaglestaff's sitting on the bench because he's not getting a shot off, right? Like, you brought him here to create shots. Like, that's a major problem. So if it's going to come from somewhere else other than Honor Huff, and Chance Moore can create a little bit just because he's a bull running toward the basket, you got to have some shot creation, and you brought him to do that, Trayson Eaglestaff. He's got to start playing well against some quality teams, and from here on out, it's going to be quality teams. Got to figure it out. Last thing we'll hit on, just something that you've noticed, and again, similar to that point there with shot creation, but the offense just looks vanilla at times. You know, it's looked significantly better, similar to their first point overall. Like, West Virginia's offense has looked significantly better against lesser competition. I get that you could probably say that for the teams that are ranked inside the top 25 right now. When they play, you know, a low major school and they scored 95 points, right? Their offense looks really good. So you can say that against, you know, for West Virginia and for a lot of teams. I get that. But for West Virginia specifically, like, in their 9 wins, West Virginia's done a really good job moving the basketball around, getting everybody involved. Those 9 games, there's been 7 different players lead the team in scoring. That's really impressive. It looks like, man, scoring can come from anywhere on the floor when you play against those teams. And then the 4 games you lost, it looks like there's only one option for scoring, and it's Honor Huff, right? 3 of West Virginia's 4 games that they've lost, Honor Huff's been the leading scorer, probably overall. I'm taking a guess. Probably he's been the leading shot taker overall across 4 games. I know he didn't lead the team in shots every game, but overall led the team in shots, I'm sure. And then you think about West Virginia's most recent loss to Ohio State. It was a really, to me, and we talked about this, you know, immediately post-game in that one, it was a really predictable offense out there. It was run around Honor Huff for an open 3 or send Chance Moore to the basket downhill with the ball in his hands and make a bucket or go to the free throw line. That was West Virginia's offensive game plan, especially in the second half. Belo was like 7 for 7 in that game, and then I don't know what happened, right? Because the offense went away from him, went away from everything. Chance Moore go, Honor Huff run around, shoot a 3, Chance Moore go to the hoop. Like, and I'm intentionally making it sound so simple because that's just what it looked like on TV. And then you lose that game. So if West Virginia wants to ultimately, again, as we tie a bow on this thing, if West Virginia wants to build a resume or just pick up a resume building signature, whatever you want to call it, quad 1 win, then they need to make significant strides on both sides of the floor, and there is time for them to do that, but it's January. It's January, and I'm not going to harp on, again, the month that comes 2 months after that. as you turn the calendar to a new year, West Virginia literally turns to a new year in basketball because you're 0-0 in Big 12 play. And like I said earlier in the show, like, you got a lot to do. You got a lot of work to do, but you have a lot of opportunities to do it. And it starts against Iowa State. That's not going to be easy at all. At all. No one's going to think they're going to win that game. No one thought West Virginia would go into Kansas and win that game last year either, just saying. But, like, you got to start picking up some wins. You just have to if you want this season to be anything. And it starts with cleaning up those three things. You got Trace Eaglestaff. Maybe he's the candidate for shot creation. Let's go. Give him the ball. Let him go to work. Hopefully he can get going. Second half defense, you got to play basketball for 2 halves on the defensive side of the floor. And then the offense, just it's got to look less predictable. Honor Huff is really good, but he can only do so much. Chance Moore, really good, attacking the rim. Really, he's. I think I've said this before, but I've never seen anyone do what he does when it comes to, like, putting a shot up on the glass and then going and getting it himself. He is unbelievable with that around the rim. He is so quick with, like, that second jump. He's unbelievable. But as unbelievable as Chance Moore is at doing that, you got to find answers elsewhere. And I even think, I'm rambling now, but, like, I even think back to, like, the game against Clemson. Chance Moore's first game, as good as he looked in that game, and for the first, I don't know how many, like 34 minutes, I was really happy with West Virginia's performance. I was like, man, like, this is against Clemson, not a bad opponent, taking it to him a little bit, looks like we're going to win, and then he didn't. And, like, since that moment, obviously, with the games against lower competition aside, since that moment, it hasn't felt the same. Xavier was a whole different story, right? Red hot shooting. You never felt good about that one. Wake Forest, you felt decent at times, but it was only tied at half, and Juke Harris was in foul trouble, and you knew he was going to come out in the second half and do what he did. Maybe not quite to that level, but he really went off in the second half. Then Ohio State, like, that might have, maybe there's 2 times against in these 4 losses where you felt good. It was the first 34, 35 minutes against Clemson, and it was about the first 30 minutes against Ohio State. You looked all right, but you got to finish. This team has to start finishing. Because we could be having a whole different conversation if West Virginia came in here and we sat and said, all right, well, they got blown out when they played against teams of power conference caliber teams, right? They didn't. In fact, they should have won 2 of them at least. And here we are. So you got to start closing out games, full 40 minutes, and see what happens. But again, this is episode 118 of Mountaineer Moment, your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. Hit that subscribe button for us. And we'll see you next time. Here soon, we'll be breaking down a preview of the Big 12 opener for West Virginia on the road, Ames, Iowa, Hilton Coliseum on January 2nd. So we'll see you next time on Mountaineer Moment. Let's go Mountaineers.